Welcome to the Queens of Quality podcast, episode 4.
Episode 4. Welcome back, Michelleanne.
Welcome back, Jen.
Thanks for having me.
It's always great to talk with you.
We try to have fun, right? That's part of we were talking before about being human,
Yes.
right? Bringing the humanity back into it. So I always say that, we spend more of our waking hours at work than we do anywhere else. So it has to be fun or at least enjoyable.
Right.
So
sometimes I just say that we're putting the fun back in dysfunctional, but it's fine.
That's fine too. Whatever works. As long as, it's a little, entertaining, you have some sort of satisfaction out of it. You know what I mean? Like, it's just because it's work doesn't mean it has to be laborious. So
Exactly.
there you go. Okay. So what do you want to talk about today?
So today we're going to talk about quality culture and what that means. And
that's a good one.
Laying the groundwork.
Exactly. Yep. If I think about the analogy of the house that we talked about in episode 1, it's really that foundational piece, and really the framing that goes into the house, because again, it kind of sets the structure for everything else that you do from a quality and compliance perspective.
Exactly.
Excellent. Yep.
So, and then what does quality culture look like?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So is that my official question?
Yes, that is your official question.
Fantastic. Okay. I just want to make sure I'm, I always have an opinion. Sometimes I'm not asked for it. So I try to, make sure that I'm being asked it. Yeah. Some days are better than others with that, but we'll see. But no, when we talk about like a quality culture, it's like usually that really like nebulous kind of like philosophical thingy that no one can really define. For me, it's about building the habit to think about quality, and what does that really mean, and kind of making it the normal, because we all have our normal and it may look a little funky to other people, but that's my normal. That's my frame of reference. That's our culture. And we talked before about the language. Language is an important part of any culture, and those communication channels, and making sure that we're using the words within the context of how they're defined for that organization, kind of thing, and I know, if we go into the Wayback Machine, because it happened many, many, many moons ago, when I was a wee tyke, I worked in a small biotech that was in the midst of like this huge growth spurt. Mm-hmm. And so many people there came from big pharma. So they went from really large organizations that they worked at for 20, 25 years into this now like entrepreneurial spirit biotech with less than 1,000 people. And needless to say, the culture was different, and, I had a I had a conversation with a colleague who was basically, she's just like, I don't understand. It's not in the SOP, and this, that we have to do this. We have to do this. And, it wasn't this way at my previous company, and it's in the SOP and this and that. And I was just like, okay, I get it, but let's go to the regulations. And she looked at me like it was like a little off kind of thing. And again, using the different words, but same language kind of thing, or finding what that similar language was, we went back to the regulations, and that's where, I had said to her, so, this is what the regulations say. And you would have thought that, again, I told her the meaning of life. She's like, it's always been in the SOP. And I'm like, and you've come from a very established, well framework, hyper risk averse
exactly
organization, so this organization has a different approach. It still meets the regulatory requirements. It just doesn't have all the other stuff associated with it.
Yep.
And that's where it was really it was really important. It was a really important conversation because, again, one, we got on the same page from a language perspective, and two, it's where, again, a lot of people can get really uncomfortable
Mhm.
with their shift in culture, from,
Yes.
again, whether it's a small company going to a big company or a big company going to a medium company or even a small company, it's just different.
Yes.
Not wrong. As long as it meets the regulatory requirements, it's not wrong.
Right. Well,
But again, that culture could just be different.
yes. And I think that that's really important. And I think that that's part of where this ties into, first of all, okay, so there are two phrases that we really prefer never to hear again. And one is that's the way we've always done it.
Mhm. That's nails on a chalkboard for me. Yeah.
It really is. It really is. Like I can almost feel a spike going through my eye at that point. And this is not how we did it at the previous company, because
Right.
that is so telling and so prevalent.
Mhm.
And that's also, I feel like that's part of where we come up with the modality for how we process at Metis, and with the understanding that there is not a one size fits all. We've
Mhm.
talked about that at length
Right.
before,
Yep.
that there's no one size fits all for regulatory practice, for quality systems. Um, every company is its own unique snowflake. Um, um,
I laugh, and it's kind of true.
it is,
Right. Yeah.
and so years and years ago, I worked at a small company who was super excited about purchasing the big rolling racks for files when they bought them from the local Pfizer office.
Okay.
And they were super excited because they were like, hey, these were Pfizer's rolling racks, and you know, they they're selling them. And I was like, okay, let's back up for a second. Because
Go ahead.
at the time we were a very small company. And
Right.
so we could have at that point made the decision to leapfrog over a lot of unnecessary
Right.
infrastructure and storage by taking that opportunity to also go paperless, instead of hoping that there was Pfizer juju in the rolling racks. And
I was gonna say
um,
it doesn't contain their trade secrets. Like,
exactly, like there's no
right.
magic in the rolling racks.
Right.
It's
Exactly.
just a place to store paper. Um,
If you build it, they will come.
oh my God, I know.
Yeah. Yeah.
And, at the same
Uh-huh.
time, like I recently did a site audit, which is not, so most of what we're talking about on this podcast and within our organization is doing sponsor quality development, sponsor quality work,
Mhm.
where it's very much focused on the sponsor.
Right.
And we still do site audits, so for clinical trial sites. And I did an audit at a site where they still did everything on paper. And I got to tell you, I was a bit gobsmacked by that. I was like, wow, really? And they were super committed to staying in paper files and charts.
Hmm.
Um, and I don't really understand that because it's 2022. And so, we really can move to a different place with that. And even more recently, like last week, I did another audit of it was a qualification audit for a vendor, and they have sites, one on the East Coast and one on the West Coast,
Mhm.
and they do everything in paper. And so and they require wet signature. So in order to get
Wow.
things like SOPs approved, they need
Right.
wet signature and FedEx.
Wow.
And so we had some in-depth conversations about that,
Right.
and that perhaps it's time for them to look at moving to a 21 CFR Part 11 compliant
Right. Yeah.
system.
Investing in it, because it really is an investment,
Right.
and for me, it's like, I think of, my Six Sigma brain kicks in,
Right.
when you talk about using FedEx or other, overnight type of delivery mechanisms that are not email or
Right.
other validated system or a validated system to get a wet signature on things, like that just makes like my Six Sigma brain explode.
Well, and also like they use paper files for notes in the lab,
Mhm. Mm,
so they don't
okay.
even use ELN.
Right.
And
Okay.
that's another area where efficiencies could be improved.
Right. Exactly. Yeah, thank you, Glinda. You know?
Exactly, exactly.
You know but that's where, again, it's one of those things where the quality culture, because I'm really fascinated by the people that you were auditing who are very committed to staying in paper. Was there a rationale provided, or did you get that far with them in terms of why they were so committed to the paper piece of it?
They just like it better.
Okay. All right. Well, that's their culture, right? It's
Yep.
not necessarily wrong. You know, it's not efficient,
Nope.
and it has a couple of risks associated with it that I won't even get into that rabbit hole, you know, but it's not a but, it's an and. And as long as they're still meeting all the regulatory requirements, it's entirely reasonable to do it that way,
Yes.
because that's why we did it 25 years ago. But anyway, um,
Right.
right. Yeah, I'm fascinated by they're really committed to the whole paper piece.
And so like I said, it was a clinical trial site, and it
Mhm.
was a site with both blinded and unblinded studies going on, and
Right.
they had a fantastic system for keeping, blinded staff
Mhm.
from mingling with unblinded staff, and all of the documents separated, and it
Mhm.
was it was great, and they do all of the things for their quality culture. They do all of the things that I love to see, in
Mhm.
that they're constantly reassessing their system and what works and what doesn't, and how can they tweak their systems
Right.
little by little to make them better. And
Mhm.
that's something that I, you know, that warms the cockles of my heart, because,
Right. Mhm.
when you talk to someone who is committed to that, as opposed to that nails on the chalkboard piece of,
Right.
this is the way we've always done it,
Mhm.
it makes me feel better to know that they're, you know, even though they've got everything on paper, they're still working to tweak their systems all of the
Mhm.
time.
Right.
And that's
And that
something that we also try to do. I know, like, because you and I have been in this business for a couple of minutes now,
right.
and and we
The
don't do stuff
couple.
the way that we did it 20 years ago.
Right. Yeah. Thank God. Um Right.
Finding
Yeah.
miracles everywhere.
Exactly. So, but that's where, again, the culture piece of it, and I appreciate what you were saying too, like they really are committed not only to their methodology, you
Mhm.
know, it is aligned with the regulatory requirements, and they are constantly assessing it,
Yes.
and they want to be better, and they want to progress, even though it may not be in an electronic fashion, you know, it still is a progression, of improvement and that kind of thing,
Yes.
because I had had an experience with someone who you know, I asked about their quality organization, and what
Mhm.
their quality organization looked like and what their idea of quality culture was. And the response was, well, we hire quality people.
Okay.
And that told me all I needed to know, and, because he was a very senior person within the organization. And when that was the response about the quality organization, I was like, okay, we're talking again, different words, same words, different language. I'm talking the capital Q quality, like quality assurance, quality control, quality management. He's talking small q, as in they hire good people, which again is very important because you need those small q quality people,
Right.
in order to support the large q quality management
Yeah.
kind of thing. So, and again, just that whole speak the same language thing, it told me a lot, in terms of the level of understanding as to what a quality organization really does.
Mm-hmm.
And it then made sense as I got, further into the conversation and talked with others within the organization. And there's very few SOPs and they're not really fans of process. And well, we all came from the same big company, even though we're only 500 people now. Like,
Right.
we, we're fine because we passed the inspection, and it's like, that's not always the best indicator
Right.
of, there's something to be said that, past experience predicts future success
Mm-hmm.
kind of thing. Um, this isn't necessarily the place where you want that analogy,
Yeah.
because again, you're not able to even that demonstration piece, even though it was all on paper that you were talking about, they were able to demonstrate
Yes.
that they have been compliant with ...
Yes. And not only like have they been compliant with, but going through past reports on the site, every time they had a finding that needed to be addressed, they went the extra mile.
Uh-huh. Right.
And so it's constant improvement of the quality culture.
Right.
And we see that you can sense that when you're in a company that takes that seriously.
Uh-huh. Right. Absolutely.
Because like you said, getting through the milestone, getting through the inspection, that's a milestone. That doesn't mean that there's not still work to be done.
Right.
And
Yeah.
sometimes, as we know, an inspection is a snapshot in time.
Uh-huh.
And just because something wasn't seen in that snapshot in time doesn't mean that there weren't problems that weren't identified by the inspector or the auditor.
Right. And it's even that a couple of episodes ago, we talked about even in audits, where's the risk?
Yes.
It might not be that you have like a non-compliance, with a regulatory requirement or something like that. But there's a huge risk because that slippery slope, you just stepped on it.
Yeah.
And it may not be that way now. Like we're talking about that snapshot in time. Give it 6 months
Yes.
or however long or whatever it is, because then it's going to completely, like, that house of cards then comes down,
Exactly.
because you don't have that framework. You have things that might be like, leaning up against each other in just the right way, but you get a strong breeze and you're done. You get a light breeze and you're done.
Right.
you know so that's where, again, that culture, that framework, and that self-improvement piece really comes into play, and that self-identifying piece, because again, it's that constant, we talk about the plan, do, check, act kind of
Yeah.
cycle, and that's essentially where, quality management is built on. you know you have to plan it, you have to do it, you have to check that you did it right, and then you got to make sure, action, and do, check, act. You act like you take the action to further improve it, and you go along that cycle and all that kind of stuff. It's so second nature to me, I forget actually how to explain it.
Right. Because we
I've lived
really
there for so
have
long. Yeah.
right. We really have embodied that. We've really put in the work on that and made that into a habit for us.
Right. And I know for myself, I'm fairly confident I speak for you in this respect as well, because we've had a few conversations now. Um,
We're not even talking the recorded ones.
Right. Well, there you go. Right. They should be recorded. So, I'm a big believer in self-improvement, and, I just want to be better. I don't want to be perfect. I'm not going to be perfect.
Pause. That's our next episode. That's not this.
It is?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Sorry. I got a little too aggressive in my scrolling. This piece is edited out.
Yeah. So it stops at the lesson of being the happy medium between the ultra conservative and nothing at all. Quality culture comes from the top. It's not just words on the page.
Okay. Yep. All right. So what were we talking about in terms of, we've had a few conversations. I'll pick another analogy in terms of how we're aligned.
Okay.
The Plan, Do, Check, Act, right?
Yes.
Should I, hold on, let me make sure. Okay. All right. So we're going to try and pick it up and, again, for the edit. All right. So you and I have had a few conversations now about a variety of things.
Absolutely.
And I'm pretty sure we're aligned in these aspects, but again, having that framework ends up being the guide for the next thing.
Right.
And again, it's that progression, and it really is about messaging from the top down, and that's the piece that where I was talking about the conversation I had with someone at a high level, for them to say, well, we hire quality people, and then for me to go in and see evidence of that, from, again, my quality capital Q brain, and the frame of reference that he had for quality people, there were very little processes, there was very little training documentation, there were no audits being done. They had 2 people who were handling quality activities for a company of over 1,000 people, and they had a marketed product in the US.
Right.
And that does not promote a quality culture, capital Q quality.
Yes.
And there was no processes, there was no consistency, kind of thing. They happened to get asked the right questions,
right,
to be able to demonstrate those things. And don't get me wrong, I do not believe in over proceduralizing things, or being overly or uber, it's not meant to be overly laborious, right? I joked earlier, work doesn't have to be laborious. That's not the point either. So in terms of
there has to be a balance, right?
Absolutely.
We're not looking to proceduralize activities to keystroke.
Right.
Which is what some people expect. I've worked with people like that who wanted, work instructions to be to keystroke level on how to write a narrative. Work instructions to be to keystroke level of how to navigate their internal system that fell under that umbrella of the quality organization that we've touched base on.
Right.
And there has to be a balance there.
Mm-hmm.
We need the balance of, okay, this is the regulation, these are the guidelines, this is where you have your sweet spot,
right,
of where you're functioning, and you have to follow that. You have to follow that to the letter,
right,
but it has to be high enough level that you can still function in it.
Right.
And that's really, so that goes into, and we'll talk about this at another time, but that goes into the difference between quality process on the clinical side versus quality process on the manufacturing side, where everything is very much to the keystroke.
Right. Yes.
So for GMP, it's a whole different it's a whole different conversation, because that is very much keystroke dictation.
And it's a list.
Yes.
Whereas, and to your point, we'll get into this a little bit more, but just to kind of tee it up for that conversation, GMPs are essentially, or the processes associated with GMPs is essentially the list. Whereas for GCPs and GVPs, it's very situational.
Yes.
They're very if then, and those decision diamonds, as I think about like process flows and that kind of thing. And, I'm excited to have that conversation with you too, because again, it comes down to how do you create a quality management system, not the culture, because the culture you can do, because the culture is again that higher level, conceptual, this is how we as the organization function. And when you try to operationalize it as part of your quality management system, how do you serve those two audiences?
Exactly.
And it's very possible.
Yep.
And
it is possible.
It is an art form.
Yes.
So again, because again, you generally we all have our biases. If we think about the humanity piece, we have our biases. So, you have your leaning towards one way or then the other. And how do you make it that way for your organization? And developing the solutions that work for everyone, and ensuring that it's based off your quality culture in general. Because you have to have that frame. How does it operate within that framework?
Yep.
And do you have all of the right pieces? And I always have one of the things that I always kind of laugh about, or not laugh, it's just more of it just brings a smile to my face. When I say risk in a conversation, it lands very differently with pharmacovigilance people than it does with GMP people.
Oh, absolutely.
Because 9 times out of 10, and just I know you know what I'm talking about, but for our listeners, more often than not, pharmacovigilance professionals are healthcare professionals. So when you hear risk, or when they hear risk, they think of risk to the patient, like the immediate health of the patient.
Yep.
Whereas, talking with GMP people, it's usually about operational risk.
Yep.
That can ultimately impact the patient. But again, you just that frame of reference is just very different. And, I've had, PV people like go white on me, like they get very ashen and, all the blood leaves their face, and it's like, no, it's okay. That's not it.
Right.
It's a risk, operational risk to the organization. So, same thing with deviations. When I talk about deviations with quality management people, it means something very different than if I'm talking about deviations with someone who's a GMP person.
And that's why it's very important and I know that we've talked about this before on previous episodes of the podcast. That's why it's very important for us to make clear those definitions.
Right.
And, know your audience.
Right.
Know
and
that place.
Exactly. And that language piece is a really big component of the overall quality culture.
Yes. And so the lesson here is that there's a happy medium between the ultra conservative and nothing at all.
Right.
And that the quality culture really does come from the top and is foundational.
Right.
And it's not just words on the page.
Agreed.
And so, we have to, for longer term success, it pays to set the culture sooner than later.
Absolutely. Yeah. Agreed. For
yeah.
a variety of reasons that I'm fairly confident we're probably going to have other conversations about.
There's no doubt that we will. So thank you very much. I am Michelleanne and here with Jen. Thank you for listening to the Queens of Quality. Please subscribe to our website Follow our website at www.metisconsultingservices.com. Subscribe to our podcast on your favorite podcast platform. Please feel free to submit any questions. We would love to hear back from you. And if you enjoy the show, rate and review us wherever you get your podcasts.
Thanks, Michelleanne.
Thanks, Jen.
We'll see you soon.
Ciao.